So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and we can go.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Tim Pattinson. I'm one of the Hampshire SENDIASS support workers. So I've come today to talk to you about transitions, and hopefully what I'll be able to do is explain a little bit about sorry, I've just spotted something on my screen. That's it. Yeah, so hopefully I'll be able to explain what you should be thinking about in terms of looking at transitions for your children who are moving from perhaps one school to another or whatever, really. So as I don't know you all, I'm going to talk about those children who have got education, health and care plans, but I'll also sort of talk about perhaps some children who are still on SEN support and haven't got their plans yet. So obviously I don't know at what stages you're all at with your children, young people. So we'll just go with the flow for now, and then hopefully if you've got any questions you can put them in the chat as has been requested. So what I'm looking at today really is, as I said, is to consider the annual review process, specifically in relation to how the children can be prepared for any transitions that they might have coming up. Just trying to move my notes up there, that's it. The transitions you would expect are, if you've got a child who has an education, health and care plan, what you might be expecting the school that they're currently in to be doing, things that you might want to think about in terms of what your children need moving from one setting to another. And you are the ones that know your children the best, because you know what they're thinking, well, maybe not what they're thinking, but you know what they're airing in terms of their views, possibly, if they're able to do so, about the future. We'll talk a little bit about the annual review process, and particularly around children who are 14 plus, so year 9 and onwards, and the changes that need to be discussed in the annual review at that point. So just to be clear about what we mean by transition, so the main educational phase transfers, as you probably all know, is excuse me, between early years and primary. Just let me put this off. Sorry.
Tim, if you need to take a moment and get a glass of water.
Yeah, I just thinking I might just pop and do that. Would that be all right? Do you want to?
Of course, it's absolutely fine.
Just bear with me.
Right, so that just gives me an opportunity to say that if anyone does have a question at any point, do pop it in the chat, and I'll slide it in for Tim whenever I can, when it's appropriate. And I appreciate everyone's going to be at different points with this and different stages. Obviously, what we're trying to do with questions is Tim can't ask specific questions about your specific situation, but we can answer the questions generically as much as we can. I will also pop some other little bits and pieces of information in the chat for you as we go that might prove useful. And what we tend to do is pop, if we've been given any useful resources by Tim, we tend to pop them. I tend to pop them in my HPCN group, which is Heart and Rushmore. So if you want to do that, pop anything in, or if there's a link or whatever, it'll be there in the chat for you. Welcome back, Tim.
Right, sorry about that. It's one of the dilemmas, isn't it, of working at home and having to nip downstairs. Right. Yes, apologies for that. So yeah, so what I was saying was about the phase transfers between early years and primary, as you know, primary and secondary, and possibly secondary into further education or employment. And I mention employment because education, health and care plans can support young people who are going into not just college, but perhaps into a supported internship or into a supported apprenticeship. Okay, so sorry, I'm out of breath now. That's terrible, isn't it? So yes, transition should be planned as early as possible, and make sure that all the relevant information that's needed is shared with as many people as possible. All those that should be involved are involved. So the SEN Code of Practice 6.57 says, as you can see on the screen, that SEN support should include planning and preparation for the transitions between phases of education and preparation for adult life. And we talk a little bit later on about preparation for adulthood as being part of that transition. So wanted to look a little bit at the sort of key principles around transitions, so that we all know who's should be involved and to know what to expect. Need to think about your child and young person as well. I've already mentioned that you're the ones that are closest to them. You'll know if they've said anything about what's happening in September about a new school that they might be going to, if they're fortunate enough to know actually where they are going. And I know there are some parents who at the moment have children who, because the school that's been named isn't their school of choice, and are going through appeal processes, that they may not know definitely where they are going. And of course that's difficult for them and for you who are supporting them. And here it's Hampshire SENDIASS. If you've got any queries that you want to discuss with us, then I've got some information at the end of this presentation that would give our phone number and our email address and everything. So we're more than happy to sort of discuss that with you. But it's really important to get the views of children and young people. And I've also put some resources at the end of this slide show as well around the types of information that you could provide for the school. We would hope that school would pass on as much information as possible, but there are resources out there that you could use. So that, I don't know if people have come across what they call a one-page profile, which is basically one page that gives a view. Sometimes you can put the photo of your child on there. It could have a bit of information about what their likes and dislikes are, perhaps, or what their sort of personality is. And then it also gives you an opportunity to say how that young person wants to be supported, what information is important to them that they want people to know, or what people can do to actually support them. And it's just a really brief piece of information. Helen Sanderson Associates is one website, and I've put a link at the end of these slides to identify places on the internet that you can look for those. They give you quite a few different ideas. Or it might be that your child has had or would like to have a what they call a person-centered plan. On the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Education Psychology Service website, there is some information there about transition, and quite a lot of information about transition which you might want to look at as well, particularly around person-centered planning, which, as it says, is all around the young person or the child themselves. I've also put some information there about person-centered reviews. There we're talking about annual reviews. I think that probably covers most things on there. As I said, I've put the actual web addresses at the end. So what are the challenges of transition? How do we prepare our children for moving schools? The Equality Act is the next one. I'll come back to that. So the important thing for us all to remember, though, is what does your individual child need? And we will talk a bit again in a moment about how to make sure that schools are supporting your child with the move. But you might want to think, or you might have used in the past, I don't know if anyone has so far, they might have used a transition book where the school's created that with the child at school, or photos. I know that when my son started at secondary school, he had an opportunity to actually go in and take some photos of the school when there was nobody there, and a few key people, they allowed him to do that. That might be a possibility. Or, as I said, using one-page profiles, trying to give them information. Okay, so the Equality Act 2010 is an anticipatory duty to not treat people less favourably or and to make reasonable adjustments. So this is a phrase we use quite a lot in SENDIASS when we're talking to parents. When you come to us and say, oh, this school won't do this or they won't make these changes, the Equality Act talks about making reasonable adjustments. So this means that any new setting should be ready for your child when they start the placement. Your current school should be passing on information. And again, we are quite often here where schools haven't passed on the information that they should have done. And it might be that your child doesn't have an EHC plan, they might be on SEN support, and it's really important from the old school, basically passing on information to the new school so that they are fully informed. So they can use pupil profiles, past reports, all sorts of different ways of passing on information. One of the really important ones is things like mobility and communication needs. As I say, all too often we just hear so many, stories of people whose children haven't had the information passed on, and then they get several terms down the way, and they're wondering why the school isn't providing the support that they should do. So what can you do? So if you are feeling concerned about the future transition coming up, you should speak to your child's school as soon as possible, or the setting as soon as possible. You need to ask for a meeting, and in that you need to identify what planning and what support is going to be available and what needs to be done. You need to get them to almost do like a minutes of the meeting, a record of the meeting, so that it could be agreed who does what, when they're going to do it, thinking about what extra support your child's going to need to make sure that when they do move to that new setting, that everything has been sorted and ready, that all that information is there. So I did mention about transition preparation for adulthood. So those that have got education, health and care plans, and when they reach year 9 in secondary, then that is a really important part of looking ahead for when they become adults. So this preparation for adulthood, there is a whole website produced by the government around preparing for adulthood. In a moment I'll be able to give you the areas that are considered under that, but so from year 9, every annual review should be considering the different areas for the future, whether that's not just around education but around independent living, participating in society, and being healthy. So it might be that your young person has health needs. There should be discussion around how those health needs are going to be taken care of once they move from paediatric or children's services into adult services. They should all be considered. So here I've just raised what those different areas are. Again, the Special Educational Needs and Disability Code of Practice describes those areas, and these should always be considered every time an annual review takes place. So again, just to reiterate, a transition plan is a way of making sure that everyone involved with your child or young person is working in the same way. What that looks like, they may look all look totally different, but it's a way of making a plan and recording who is responsible for what in terms of arranging different elements of the plan. So that could be visits to the school. In fact, I spoke to a parent this morning whose their child's moving from year 6 into year 7. Unfortunately, they haven't got the school of choice and are hoping to appeal or going through an appeal process at the moment. But knowing that I was going to be talking to you this morning, I asked them about any future transition, any meetings, anything that was already arranged, and their reply was the first visit to the school was cancelled. So I don't know what's going on there, but the reality is that that the current school and the new school need to get organised and get those visits started. I mean, we're into the summer term now, approaching half term. If you think about the amount of time we've got now between now and the July, it's going to go very fast, and that's the opportunity, isn't it, for young people to look at visiting the schools. Maybe they need extra visits. Schools often say, oh, they've got planned visits, but our children, our young people often need an extra visit or several extra visits so that they get used to the school. Maybe they need to go when there aren't any other children there. Maybe they just need an opportunity to look around, to ask questions, to feel comfortable. I know that some schools run summer schools and use that as their transition, but again, it's a different setup, isn't it? That there's not always, all the children aren't always there. But I think the important thing to remember is if you don't know what's going to be happening, is to ask. If your children don't know what's happening, give them an opportunity to say how they're feeling, for them to ask questions. And communication is key, really, in all of this. So what I've done is I've put some resources here. So we've got a really good explanation about the annual review for year 9 onwards on our Hampshire SENDIASS YouTube channel, if you want to call it that. You can access that through our website rather than just looking it up on YouTube. So we've got resources for parents and carers, for the young people themselves, and for professionals on our website. Our website address is at the bottom there. I mentioned Helen Sanderson Associates. That's just one example of information that is around person-centered practice, person-centered reviews, one-page profiles. It gives you lots of ideas. There's lots of different resources on there. I quite often use that. I have a one-page profile which I often share with young people if I'm going out to go and see them. It gives them an opportunity to find out a little bit about myself. I've put on there how I like being supported. Something like if I say something or ask you a question and you don't know what I'm talking about, please tell me. So that might be the situation this morning, I don't know. There is a YouTube, on here we've got the web address for a YouTube person-centered reviews film, which is really good. I found that this morning. I thought that was really interesting. I've got the link for the Educational Psychology Service for Hampshire and their page on transition. I can send this afterwards, and hopefully it'll be distributed to you all. And then I've got the Hampshire SENDIASS web page address, our email address that you can send us your queries and ask us to contact you, or our phone number. And I think that sort of covers it for now. I'll leave that on. Are there any questions
I've got one that I've got a couple actually. I've got one that's quite a specialist situation, because it's about a young person who is currently in year 4 but is August born, so decelerated, so would normally be in year 5, and the parent wants to move them from a mainstream setting to a special setting for year 7 and wanted to ask when that should happen. I'll read you the detail, but that's the sort of the synopsis.
Yep.
So my son is decelerated and is currently in year 4, August born, so natural cohort is year 5. We are wanting to move from mainstream to special for secondary. Do I start this in September 2022, when he would actually be in year 5 but naturally year 6, or do I do an early review now? I'm also struggling to find a private EP who I believe we will need, as our parental preference is a private school in Surrey, private specialist school in Surrey. The specialist school will want him to return to his natural cohort. He's never been taught in this year. He joined reception at compulsory school age. Whilst I would prefer this not to happen, I would not fight it if he could be in a class of age 10 children with 2 adults. Now, I think there's 2 key questions there, Tim. And one of them, I think, is, is a situation that does arise with youngsters, that they've been decelerated, they've started this year below, and what happens when you hit that year 7? Do you start everything in year 4 rather than year 5? Do you then effectively lose a year to go into year 7 in what would have been your year 6? That's the first question. And the second one is this issue of an EP and whether you would need a private EP.
If I can cover the EP bit first, just when I heard that as part of the question, I don't think you would need a private EP. If your child has already got an education, health and care plan, because you're not likely to get into a specialist setting without an education, health and care plan, you shouldn't need to get a private EP to do a report in order to go into a private or an independent setting. You can request independent settings, those that are on what they call the Section 41 list. I don't know if you've come across that. So if you look up Section 41 list on the website,
find it.
Yeah. It's a government website, so it lists all of the independent schools which have registered with the Secretary of State for Education. And if you were to name a school that is an independent school on that list, then the local authority have to consult with them. There are other schools that are not on the Section 41 list that you can name, but the local authority don't then have to consult. It would be advisable for them to do that, and they quite often do in situations where they can't find school placements for children. But certainly but you shouldn't need to get a private educational psychology assessment.
No, and I think there are some schools that are perhaps utilised more frequently than others. In my neck of the woods, I'm in Fleet, there are lots of youngsters who go from this area, Hampshire, for example, to Moore House,
yeah,
that I think, you know, it's seen as a school that does a specialist thing, and recognised. It might be more challenging perhaps if it was less clear cut. I don't know. The parent has said the child does have an EHCP.
Right.
So I suppose the thing you're looking to do in part, isn't it, Tim, is to change the setting that you want to move forward to being a specialist setting rather than a mainstream setting.
Yes. Yeah. And it could be that, I mean, I know in this situation, it sounds like it would be an independent or private setting, private school. And that's quite, you know, reasonable to want that school. As I said, if they're on that list, then they, you know, the local authority would have to consult with them. And it doesn't matter that it's out of Hampshire either. You know, if that's the school that's nearest, that you feel is the most appropriate for setting for them, then, you know, then that's what you want to sort of pursue. Going back to the other part of the question, so the child is currently year 4 because they were decelerated.
Yeah, August birthday.
So they would normally have been in year 5 if they weren't decelerated. Going into year 6, basically had they been going into year 6, then you would expect them to have the school would put together an annual review in the autumn term anyway. So you would be, I think you need to be making sure that the annual review is brought forward and is held in the autumn term, at the latest, really. Because if you're then wanting them to go into a year 7 placement, which would then bring them back in line with their age. I know they're an August birthday, but that, I think, if I'm thinking it correctly, that they would still be ready for a year 7 start in September 2023. I don't, again, think it would necessarily matter that they've missed out on a year 6 as such. I think going into a specialist placement as well, they're going to assess the child on where they're at the moment, whether they're, you know, year 5 or year 6, really.
So I think what we're saying, Tim, is really it's not going to be too soon to start, and actually,
no.
You know,
If they were by their chronological school age, they would be expecting to have, had they been year 6, they would be expecting to have an annual review in the October, you know, in the autumn term anyway.
Yeah.
So, you know, make sure that does happen, if that sort of helps.
Yeah, and I think it's a case of just starting to talk about it, isn't it?
Absolutely,
and trying to get everybody on board, because if you can get the current school to support it, that is the right move, not necessarily the right school, but the move to a different kind of setting.
Yes.
And then, you know, that's all part of the process. And certainly my personal experience was, as Tim said, we used school budgeted EP hours at transition in order to ensure that we had up-to-date information. And mainstream schools will have EP time budgeted. So I hope that is helpful. I know you've got quite a unique situation. Okay, we've got just a thank you there for the answers there, Tim, and to say the school is on board, and the private school and the salts. So it sounds like hopefully it'll go through smoothly for you.
Hope so.
Okay. So, how do you get a transition plan for a child going into year 7 who doesn't have an EHCP, but they are currently going through tribunal in order to have an assessment, and that is in progress? The current school is not being helpful, and the child is a school refuser.
Okay, that's a good question. Really, I mean, I suppose the issue there is that the school isn't really being helpful. You need to try and get them to at least agree a meeting, if possible, So they're currently year 6 going into year 7. They haven't got a plan. I don't know if in this situation it's the parent that has requested the education, health and care needs assessment, or the school. I would imagine from what I'm hearing that it's probably the parent that has made the request.
Yeah, correct. I've just had that through pop up in front of me.
Yes. Excuse me. We're happy in SENDIASS to sort of help if we can, you know, to advise, but it's some way of having a meeting, really. If you're not getting anywhere with the school that they're currently in, then I would be contacting the secondary school that they're about to go to and having those conversations, and actually explain to them that you've made the request as well. Because they will want to know that information.
Yeah, I mean, a young person doesn't have to have an EHCP to have additional needs that are recognised and provided for within ordinarily available provision. And I think, personally, I've always been proactive and gone and made sure that those things have happened to myself in order to make sure they happen. So go and talk to the school.
Absolutely. Yes. I mentioned, you know, taking my son and him doing visits to the school. He didn't have a plan at that point, you know, so that was our, you know, our sort of, I was going to say hounding the school, you know, this is what we think would work for him, you know, let him visit, take some photos, you know, I think his primary school wasn't that proactive themselves, so you know, that's what you're there for, isn't it?
I think sometimes secondary schools are much bigger, aren't they? And they have many more pupils, but that means sometimes they actually sometimes have more provision. And certainly, I've got girls in year 7 and year 8 at the moment, and what I've seen is the secondary just has more resource to deal with that sort of thing, and actually there are an awful lot of youngsters who don't have EHCPs but do have additional support. So do talk to them. And the pastoral care often in secondary schools is very different to what you see in primary, because it's there as a separate entity rather than just something that's added onto the class teacher's list of responsibilities.
And if the school don't know what your child is, you know, who's coming into the school needs, then there's no better person than yourselves to tell them, really. I know that for those who haven't got education, health and care plans, the schools, you know, have to provide SEN support if your child needs it, if it's been identified. And that is a worry that we quite often hear, is that, you know, partway, you know, a term or so down the line, parents come to us because their child or young person hasn't had the support that you were expecting them to get, and that is because the previous school haven't passed the information on. You know, make sure that they have got the information. They will, a lot of schools put together what they call passports that they send around to all of the teachers, explaining what your child's particular needs are and what to look out for, whether they've got an EHC plan or not. So, you know, make sure that they've got all the information that they need.
I think particularly in the scenario where you're describing, where your young person isn't in school at the moment, I think, you know, place a call to the SENCO. You know, they will direct you to the right person, and just start opening those lines of communication. You know, tell them your concerns, and I think, you know, I think they'll be open. They, you know, they want to be able to support your son into coming into school as much as they possibly can. So hopefully, but also appreciate you're also going through the, you know, the tribunal for the assessment. So but perhaps don't wait for that to happen to start having those conversations with the secondary school.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, another interesting one here. Let me just flick back to where it's, because I think it's a situation that, you know, many parents across the county will be in. Let me just find it. How do you handle a scenario where you've got a young person who has, so it actually says, would like to ask about non-verbal or communication from a young person. I think therefore the question is about a young person who isn't expressing or able to express their own views, and how that is handled. If that's not correct, please, to the questioner, please do correct me.
I mean, I've worked with young people, I've worked with adults who don't have any verbal communication. It's finding alternative ways to record their views. That could be if they will let you, a video of I don't know, how they react in certain situations. If it's more that they won't speak when they're in the presence of other people, it could be that they write things down. I've used that quite a lot with young people. It's trying to find a way that they can express their views. Again, often we see the views of young people that have been interpreted by school staff, and you do wonder, whose views they are, but it's really being clear. Picture exchange communication system, visual aids. There is it board?
Is it board writer?
I've forgot what it's called now. Some of the Hampshire libraries have them.
Yeah.
Something like Board Maker or something.
Yeah, maybe like a Board Maker.
I don't know.
I know exactly what you mean, but I can't. Yeah. Let's see if I can find it.
But there are resources in the libraries that certainly they used to be. I'm hoping they're still there, where you can put together pictures to make with symbols and pictures and photos and all sorts, really, that you can access. And then photos, whatever their communication is, it's about using that, really. And
I mean, I would think that perhaps a young person is already in a setting where teaching staff are experienced in communicating with your young person, and then as Tim says, it's just making sure that you agree. I think Tim said early on, we know our young people better, and sometimes those things that come home and say, what I want to be when I grow up, and you look at it and think, no, that's not that's not right. But it's making sure that you portray that, isn't it? And and everyone's got a right to a person-centered approach, whether they're verbal or not. It may be slightly more challenging, but that doesn't mean it's any less worthy.
And actually, the person-centered reviews and go on.
I'm just giggling because someone's just said mine wanted to be a snowman when he grew up.
Oh well, that's a new one.
That's probably frozen for you. Yeah.
No, what I was going to say was the person-centered planning. It is meant to be. So I attended a person-centered review because I was there to support the parent, not the young person at this particular meeting. And it was very, very much, this was done by the EP service just a couple of months ago. And actually, I have to say, it was a really good meeting. It was so child-centered. It was all about what he wanted to do, his views. And if you get an opportunity or they get an opportunity to have a person-centered meeting, then go for it, because it just brings so much information around what they do want to do. And it's interesting you saying about the snowman, being a snowman. It might be that they want to, in the future they could work in a I don't know, a snow dome or something. It's not never dismiss and I'm not saying you would, but never dismiss something like that, because it's about how you get from that future view back to where they are now. What would they need to do? It's
sort of differentiating that, isn't it, almost? My daughter will say she wants to be a doctor or a vet or a paramedic, and all these jobs that would would be challenging for an awful lot of people. And we always say to her things like, well, maybe you can help out at the animal shelter, and all. Exactly, and actually that would give her exactly what she needed. So it's trying to understand what you get from that, isn't it? And what you you know. Yeah. Okay. What did you want to be when you grew up, Tim?
I wanted to be a chef, actually. I'm certainly not a chef. Well, I can cook though. Yes, you know. Yeah, I think I can cook anyway. My wife seems to think I can cook.
Well, that's good. That's a good start. I didn't have a clue. I still don't think I do. But then I don't think I've grown up either. So there we go. Okay. I haven't got any more questions at the moment. So if anybody else has another question that they would want to pop in, please do. I will pop those resources that Tim has shared there. I can't copy and paste them, that's frustrating.
Well, I can send you the slideshow.
Can you just copy and paste those links to me on the chat, and then I can and then I will share those elsewhere as well, because I know it's so much easier than typing the things back in again, which is just hard work. If anybody else does have something else that is a burning question, please do not miss the opportunity to ask it now. Couple of other things coming up that may be of interest to you, particularly because there's a couple of unique scenarios been asked about that I think you might want to investigate further. Tomorrow is our parent-led engagement session, which I facilitate, and we have somebody there from SENDIASS and somebody there from Hampshire, and it can be a really good way of having a chat and saying, look, I have a particularly unique scenario, how should I progress with this, or how can we unblock that situation? And that's 11 o'clock tomorrow, which may be of interest. And then coming up next week, we have a Meet the Sen session on Friday. I don't have a topic for you at the moment. If you're not already on our Hampshire Parent Network social media channels, do follow those, because they will tell you where to find different things. Our get-togethers are once a month, and that's an opportunity to come together. Thanks, Tim. Come together with other parents and just have a chat and share and appreciate that you are not alone on this journey. And I think that makes such a huge difference. We're going to be trying to go back to face-to-face going forwards, which is going to be new. And we're going to do that across areas. So I look at Hart and Rushmore, but we also recognise that this opportunity to meet virtually like this actually enables many people to come who perhaps might not be able to otherwise due to work commitments or mobility or whatever. So we're going to have a Hampshire-wide virtual get-together as well, which I will be facilitating. So do come and join us again. This video will go up through both SENDIASS channels and HPCN channels, and so you'll be able to go back and see Tim's slides and his narrative. I will share these links. I will just pop them in chat first, so that if anybody wants to just kind of click them and sort of have them sitting there in their web browser, they can. See if this works. Yep. Oh no, sorry, Nikki, I've sent those to you directly. That was not my intention. I'll send them to everybody else as well. And then I will pop them up within my group as well. Okay, I'll just give you a minute to have a look at those links and see if there's anything useful to you there. Tim, thank you very much for your time. If people phone SENDIASS for possible triage, are you still somebody who might be on the phone lines who they get to talk to?
Sometimes. So we were a little bit short-staffed at the beginning of the year, so I did quite a lot of the telephone triage, but I tend to do the emails. But I do talk to people, yes. So you could come across me. I am the only man in the team, apart from one of the volunteers. But yeah, so yeah. But we're.
Which I think it's not, and it's a shame. And I think I see it reflected in many of my calls that we are often a very female-heavy group. Not always. We have some very, very informed and involved dads, but they are in the minority for whatever reason, for family dynamics, whatever it is. Okay, Tim's got put the telephone number for SENDIASS on the bottom there of his info as well.
For some reason, on the links, the Hampshire SENDIASS one hasn't come up as but I'll
you didn't
let
press
you
enter
sort that
after
out.
or something weird. Yeah,
I know, silly name.
So I'm going to stop the recording.